Hello everyone, welcome to today's podcast, which marks the beginning of the well-being community's efforts to raise awareness around men's mental health, particularly for students. We're diving into an important question: what does it feel like to be a man and grow up in today's world? To explore and help us explore this topic, we're honored to have with us Mr. Maroney and Don, who will be sharing their insights and experiences.
I want to add that for anyone listening, whether you're a woman willing to learn more about men, or for men just finding out how to improve their mental health, we as a committee want to appreciate your openness and curiosity to learn more.
So, culturally speaking, why do you think that men face unique mental health challenges?
I think there's a lot of pressure on men to sort of look and act and be a certain way. Men are valued by what they can take over, what they can possess, what they can control. And I think we look at men's achievements through the lexicon of the language of violence. Think about the language we use when we talk about men's achievements. You smashed it, you killed it. This sort of language is one of destruction. And I think that if you're someone who doesn't identify with that, that can be quite an alienating place to be. There's a lot of standards that are placed upon masculinity to be the strongest, who can conquer the most, who can achieve the most points in the sports game, or whatever it might be. So I think that's where a lot of the damage can come from. A lot of men and boys feel a lot of pressure to live up to that expectation.
Well, as Mr. Maroney said about how men needs to follow these certain standards for everyone, and the need to conquer in for example in competitions in sports games, men has to follow this and abide through these rules, and there's the need to conquer on most of the competitions, and that immense pressure gets enforced onto men. And I do believe that their mental health are severely being affected by this change.
Yeah, I also agree. I also believe that men have to live up to standards, and these are reasons why they have to suppress certain emotions, which can cause them to have mental health challenges.
And if you're a person that doesn't want to get involved in that, or that doesn't resonate with you as a person, as I said, it can be quite alienating. There's also a certain beauty standard or standard of appearance that is dictated by magazines and the media, much like women have to deal with every single day also. Men are often bombarded with messages of how they have to look as well as how they have to be. You guys are probably too young to remember, but I remember the adverts for Abercrombie and Fitch, a popular menswear. Well, actually it's multi-gender, but at the time it was very popular for men. And the adverts for that just used to kill me as a young person, because he wasn't the strong, muscly, six-pack sort of guy, and that was a lot to live up to. And I thought, being a teenager, that I wasn't normal, and growing up as a young man, I wasn't kind of normal. I didn't fit this ideological idea of what you should look like, as well as how to act. I just wanted to watch the football, read my books, and listen to my music. I wasn't really interested in all the competition and things that and the bantering and a lot of the things that the other lads are into. And that was quite a lonely place to be growing up.
Now, approaching this, do you guys think that there's definitely a stigma around how men should behave that is put onto men, that is conditioned by society?
Do you want to take this one, Donnie?
Yeah. Oh, definitely. Well, I believe that, we all know as a society that the stigma around men is pretty outdated. It is an outdated notion that men should behave and should act this certain way. But then, for men in general, I do think this pressure about how we need to act this certain way, and we have to be dominant, we have to be strong, and the stigma around that is not very well when it comes to men's well-being. And for my personal personal life about this stigma, I've been affected a lot by the stigma, especially in social media, where men often show how their physique and how they should represent in this certain way, and how they should be strong and be tough in front of everyone. I think it hits a lot with men, and that causes men, including boys like me, to must act this way.
Yeah, absolutely. I think what we're aiming towards, and anytime anyone spent any time in my classroom or even in my company will know that I want to paraphrase Grayson Perry, think about like a plurality of masculinity. Like, sure, we can go out and win a sports game, and of course we can provide, and of course we can do all these things that are kind of involved in typical masculinities. But men can also be caring and kind and supportive of each other, and they can be gentle, and they can listen to people, and they can hold space for people and validate other people's emotions, as opposed to just being one thing. And I think that's what's really important for us as men, as young men yourself, that you can be any way that you want to be. It doesn't make us any less of a man. In fact, I would venture to argue that it would make us more of a holistic person if we can add these gentle elements to our personality as well, which have more traditionally been associated with female and feminine traits. I think we can learn a lot from that sort of idea, that side of the coin.
How would you define traditional masculinity, and how has society shaped these notions through the years?
I think we've touched upon that, but just to reiterate, traditional masculinity is someone who's strong, someone who can take over things, someone who can provide and protect. When we talk about men protecting protection begets domination, which begets control. Right, so these are the kind of traditional masculinities in terms of how to act. We've also talked about like the traditional appearance of a man, which again, there's nothing wrong with those things. But what I'm hinting at, or I hope we're working towards, is to add certain elements to that idea of what it means to be a man in the modern era.
So, to you guys, how do you think your Mr. Maroney's definition of men should be more gentle? How do you think that leaves men feeling less stressed and more positive about their outlook?
I would never want to, it's a good question, I would never want to use the word should, because that would be quite dictatory. Like, but what I'm kind of keen to convey is we want everybody to have the space to be their own version of masculinity. If you are someone who's dominant, if you are someone who wants to be the captain of the sports team, that's absolutely fantastic. You can also have different elements of your personality. You don't have to be that one way all the time. You can also be someone who holds a mirror up to your peers. Something I always talk to the boys about in my classroom is you have to stand up to your peers. If somebody does something that you deem inappropriate, if someone's made a homophobic comment, if someone's made a sexist comment, you can say, hey man, that's not cool, we don't talk like that, that could be offensive to somebody. I think that's kind of what I'm talking about a lot with this. I think I've digressed from your original question. Maybe it's to what Donnie thinks.
About traditional masculinity, well, I do think that it has many interpretations around that meaning. But for me, as Mr. Maroney already said, it's about how men they need to be domineering and they need to be tough in front of everyone. But then, as he also stated, that men can be gentle, and it's okay to share these feelings. And I do think that men having barriers to and have like safe spaces between them is crucial. And that traditional masculinity, again, I think it's just an outdated notion that these are the qualities that men should do, in which I don't believe that us as a society needs to follow.
I really like that idea of a safe space. But I often say that masculinity can be a prison, where we're told that we have to work within the confines of what being a man should be. And what we want to do is break out of that prison and say that masculinity can be anything we want it to be. Like, you guys, you're the next generation, you can define what it becomes in the next, I don't mean to deep it too much, but in the next 10, 20, 30 years, of course. And the way we do that is by influencing each other. You guys as young people influence me. I hopefully, and the other teachers and other members of staff, influence you and your parents and so on and so forth. But I think we talked about looking after each other, making sure everybody's okay, checking in. And if you are feeling not great, it's like, bro, like this really affected me. Like, can we talk about it? And sometimes you're reluctant to do that because you think that if you say that, you're setting yourself up to be rejected because you're being vulnerable. But actually, if you know you've got a good support group around you, and there's someone who has that kind of caring personality, you're going to feel safer, as Donnie's talking about. Safer to be yourself, safer to be vulnerable, even safer to like explore an interest that might not be what boys like. Does that make sense? I think Donnie's point about being creating a safe space is really important. The next step is to create a brave space. So we create a safe space so we can explore things, but then it's a brave space to step out of what is dictated to us traditionally as men and boys.
You mentioned like masculinity being like a prison. So like, have you ever felt like pressure to meet these standards of the masculine ideas?
I think it's a really good question, David. I just got goosebumps as you asked it. As a young person, I'd be involved. I mean, Ian Neil will know this from being in my classroom in sixth form. I've walked out of situations as a 17-year-old and been really upset that I've been dragged into banter that is offensive and that I didn't feel confident enough to challenge people. I've been involved in conversations where there's been homophobic and sexist comments, and at the very least I've been there and not said anything. You know, as an older person, I now understand that silence is kind of complicity. By saying nothing, you're saying it's okay. You're saying that sort of behaviour and language is okay. And I've come out of conversations and been really upset with myself that I hadn't done anything. But of course, as a young person, you're still kind of figuring that out. And I'm not saying that you must step in every single time. It's something that you learn over time. But I've done that, absolutely. I've also, you know, as a young person, been like in the gym and I'm gonna like trying to get ripped and like it's just, you know, now I exercise, but I exercise for me and my own like physical and mental health, not necessarily to conform to any type of like standard appearance. It's a really good question.
Like, I somehow relate to what Mr. Murray said about how like because in social media, right? On Instagram especially, whenever like every 5 seconds I would scroll and there would be like this post of like muscular men, which really has has a real toll on me, because I do think I have to meet these standards, right? So again, like I always think that, okay, going to the gym will make you look like them, and going to the gym will meet these standards in which you can be better or be like them. And then I've been taught like how men don't cry, and it's a big thing for me, because I think that it has drastically affected me in some ways about how crying is a bad thing and sharing your emotions is a weakness. But then I've learned to realize that it's typical as us human beings to share, to have these emotions as well.
That's a really interesting point. That's what makes us human, right?
Yeah.
You've heard it said before that your emotions are your superpowers. And I think that's really, really important. Our emotions are what kind of help us make decisions. And there's this like logic, this idea that emotional people don't make good decisions. I read a fantastic article that just basically said that is rubbish. It's like decades old, kind of like business management speak, when actually, if you're an emotionally intelligent human being, that then allows you to make better decisions, because you're going to consider the impact of that decision on yourself and on the people around you. If it's like a work thing on your colleagues, it's a personal thing on the people that you're around. And so, I think Donnie's absolutely right. Yeah.
Now, aside from this very good mental health discussion that we've been talking about, Mr. Maroney and Don, considering that you guys are either new to that shift from high school to university, and Mr. Maroney, you being very mature and having experienced a lot, how do you think that shift feels like? The shift from high school to university and even further adulthood?
It's a really good question. What I will say to that is you never stop learning. And like, no matter how, I think if you have that mindset that you're always learning about yourself, doing the work, the inner work, to understand yourself better, to help you understand the people around you better. This work doesn't stop. It's never finished. You don't like ascend and then you get to a certain point where you kind of know everything about how to look after your mental health. I think the answer to your question is to never stop learning, never stop looking inward to try to understand yourself and your own emotions, and also to never stop listening to people, to really, really listening. I don't mean superficially, I mean really trying to understand what someone else is telling you. I think that's the one thing that I would say in answer to your question.
For me, I feel like it will be a long journey, and sometimes it will be very scary to deal with these shifts. but then again, you have your peers, you have your friends, and they'll be there to help you along the way. So like, and like, don't ever doubt yourself, and do not doubt your abilities, because you will grow and you will learn, as Mr. Moroni said, because that's what make us improve and thrive. So I believe that these shifts is there for us to just to go forward.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think that's a perfect place to end this podcast. Thank you, Mr. Moroni and Don, and David as well, for having this very thought-provoking conversation on what it means to be a man. And I think moving forward, I think it's about letting yourself be free, influencing people, and just overall moving forward. Thank you, guys.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Don.